Hi, welcome to my channel, Mission 919, devoted to information and narratives of African achievement, well-being, and prosperity. And today I want to talk a little bit about Langston Hughes' second memoir, I Wonder as I Wander. In this memoir, which covers the years 1931 until New Year's Eve 1938, Langston Hughes travels throughout the United States. He travels to Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, the Soviet Union, both Moscow and its environs, and also Central Asia. He travels to China, Japan, Hawaii, and Spain. And in this clip, I just want to talk a little bit about his experiences in Haiti and in the Soviet Union. So he traveled with his friend Zell to Haiti. He tried to he wanted to travel from the capital Port-au-Prince to a city in the north, Cap-Haïtien, and the rickety bus that they were traveling in basically could not make it all the way there because the road was washed out due to massive flooding. Eventually he made it to Cap-Haïtien about 3 weeks later, and he spent a summer there, I think. And the thing that I think he took away most from Haiti was, was the social divisions between the peasants and the poor people in general and the Haitian elite. Uh, um, if you had shoes and a coat, you wore them all the time, regardless of the weather, regardless of the heat, because the peasants and the poor people in general did not have shoes and did not have coats. And so this was a social marker, status symbols that were quite taken quite seriously. Langston Hughes did not appreciate that kind of semi-feudal social relations that existed in Haiti at the time. He insisted on hanging out with the people without shoes and without coats. He was consistent about this throughout his life. He always he viewed people as from where they were. He befriended people regardless of their social status or education, and this is one of the things that makes him one of the most interesting writers of his time and one of the most interesting artists. Um, so he spent a summer in Haiti, and then the next year he is part of a group of African Americans who traveled to the Soviet Union to make a movie. Make a movie about Jim Crow and the labor movement in the United States, but the movie doesn't come off because the screenplay is misguided, let's say, and the whole project was a little bit slapdash. The people that they invited from the United States to come to the Soviet Union really didn't have any movie making experience. They didn't have any singing experience, and they were supposed to be singing in the movie, so it didn't really work out. But Langston Hughes and the others got to spend months in the Soviet Union. They traveled to Central Asia, and Langston Hughes left the group. Most of them returned back to the United States, but I think 3 of them ended up not coming back to the United States, and one of them was Wayland Rudd, who was an actor, who actually was an actor, and he ended up having a long time career in the Soviet Union, in the film industry there, and his son actually is still there and is a performer as well. So that's very interesting. One of the most interesting things about his book is the fact that there were a layer of African Americans who were traveling all over the world at this point in the 1930s. It's something that we may not be aware of, but there were African Americans basically everywhere Langston Hughes traveled. So he was part of probably a relatively small number of people in total, but had outsized influence on how the rest of the world perceived, African Americans perceived the segregation and political and social repression that African Americans faced in the United States at that time. And I would argue that those people ended up probably having a very significant impact on how the world saw the situation in the United States, and helped eventually to make changes, reforms, political and social reforms in the United States say after the Second World War, up until the late 1960s. So anyway, they traveled to the Soviet Union and Central Asia. Langston Hughes went to Tashkent. He went to Samarkand. He went to Bukhara. He went to Ashgabat, and he made friends with fellow writers, expats like him, and then he also made friends with the people of Central Asia, and he was very taken with what he saw. The Soviet Union at that time was recovering from the ravages of the World War I and the Civil War and famines and so on and so forth, and Central Asia was basically emerging from centuries of feudalism or semi-feudalism, the colonialism of the Russian Empire, actual segregation against the Central Asian peoples by the Russian Empire of the Tsars. And so all of that was in the midst of change and transformation, and it was really part of the revolution of colonial peoples that happened during World War I and after World War I. And so this period in the 1930s, which many people think of as basically the rise of fascism and Nazism, that's true, but it was also the rise of anti-colonial movements, movements for self-determination of peoples that really began to manifest in important ways during World War I with the Russian Revolution, the Easter Rising in Ireland, and after World War I with the independence of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Serbia as well. Well, not the independence of Serbia, but Serbia repelled the invasion by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So the 30s represent sort of an expansion, a continuation of this movement against colonialism and imperialism, and Langston Hughes was at the forefront of that consciousness with respect to artists writing and taking photography and visual arts all over the world. So I just want to read one paragraph or a section of a paragraph from his experience in Central Asia. So he says, 10 years before, meaning 10 years before his trip to the Soviet Union, so it was say the early 1920s, a brown young Uzbek like Tajayev would have had to ride in the back of the streetcars in Tashkent. For previous to the revolution in Asia, there had been Jim Crow streetcars in Uzbekistan. The old partitions that once separated natives from Europeans, colored from white, were still there when I arrived. I saw them, but now anyone sat anywhere in the Tashkent trams. In 10 short years, Jim Crow was gone on trams, trains, or anywhere else in Central Asia. Russians and Uzbeks, Ukrainians and Tatars, Europeans and natives, white or colored, all went to the same schools, sat on the same benches, ate in the same cooperatives, worked in the same shops or factories, and fussed and fumed at the same problems. Gains and defeats were shared alike. In Tashkent, whenever I got on a streetcar and saw the old partitions, I could not help but remember Atlanta, Birmingham, and Houston in my own country, where, when I got on a tram or a bus or a train, I had to sit in the colored section. The natives of Tashkent, about my own shade of brown, once had to sit in the colored section too, but not anymore, so I was happy for them. How had this change been brought about in so short a time? At the City Soviet, I asked Kurbanov about it. He said, those who don't like it are almost all in jail or dead. So you see, what some of what he experienced Um, okay, next time I'm going to talk about his experiences in China and in Spain, where he was a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War in cities like Barcelona, Valencia, and Madrid. So, okay, in the name of the ancestors, and the name of and the unborn, who are the same, Ashe, 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 and we will see you soon.